On a foggy market morning, a cardboard sign said $7 for the monster. Everyone reached out. The Bulldog turned away until John, a quiet farmer, tapped a feed bucket twice and clicked his tongue once. That humble farm cadence led to a midnight feed mill, a sliding wall, cold trucks at the wharf, and a silent rescue. In the end, one calm voice was all it took to unlock yes. Asterisk Redwood Bay woke slow and silver, a hush of ocean mist drifting up from the harbor and settling across the farm stands. Canvas tents beaded with dew, strawberries glowed in green paper baskets. A coffee cart hissed like an old kettle as folks in work jackets wrapped cold hands around paper cups. Near the end of the row, beside a stack of feed sacks and a bent-handled broom, a piece of cardboard leaned against a milk crate. Someone had written in thick black marker, $7 for the monster. Behind the sign lay a bulldog, blocky head, sunken flanks, a chest too proud for the rest of him. His coat had lost its shine, and his jowls were nicked with little scars, the way fence wire nicked old gloves. He kept his eyes away from people, the way a man keeps his eyes from a bill he can't pay. When children tugged on sleeves to ask if they could pet him, parents pulled them back. The dog did not growl. He simply turned his face to the crate and filled the space between himself and everyone else with silence. John Whitaker came in from the gravel lot with a bushel of early apples slung on one shoulder and a galvanized bucket swinging from the other hand. He had a farmer's walk, soft on the knees, sure on the ground. His cap was salt-stained, his palms the color of walnut oil from years of feeding and fixing and lifting. He set his apples on his table, tucked the bucket under, and waved to the coffee girl without looking up. Most Saturdays were like this. Sell a bit, trade a bit, check prices on seed, keep an ear open for weather. He noticed the sign only because a breeze flipped one corner and the word monster flashed at him like a bad joke. He read it again. $7. He almost laughed, then didn't. A man sat on a cooler 2 stalls down, chewing a toothpick, watching nothing. The kind of man who keeps moving town to town and never shakes the dust off. Dog ain't worth more'n that. The man said to nobody, like he was spitting a seed. Bites if you look wrong. Nobody was looking wrong. They were pretending not to look at all. John wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped close enough to see the dog's breath fogged the crate. The bulldog's eyes slid to the side and away again. That was refusal, plain as any word. John knew refusal. He'd seen calves lie down in the trailer and refuse to stand because the ramp smelled like fear. He knew better than to reach. He crouched, elbows on his knees, and let his shoulders drop to the shape of not a threat. "Morning," he said. The bulldog did not answer, of course. "You got yourself a rough story, don't you?" A little girl with a braid asked her mother if $7 was enough for a dog. The mother steered her toward the kettle corn stand. The cardboard sign winked again in the small wind. John's bucket had rolled a little in the slant of the pavement. He hooked it with his boot and, without thinking, gave the rim to light tapstin on tin, the quick, hollow sound he'd used since boyhood to call heifers from the far paddock. Tap tap, he followed it with a small click of his tongue, the sound he made when he didn't want to shout. The sound cut a neat doorway in the morning noise. The bulldog's left ear twitched. Not much, just enough to show the sound had found him where words could not. John made no move. He waited. The dog slid one eye toward him, then away. A long breath rattled through his chest, like a house settling. "Easy," John said, not soft so much as steady. The man on the cooler snorted. "You can take him for $7. Won't follow you. Won't follow nobody." John kept his eyes on the dog and tapped the bucket once more, lighter. The way you tap your own thigh when you call a skittish barn cat and don't want to scare it off. The dog's front paw flexed. He lifted his chin a half-inch. The skin at his throat showed a pale groove where a collar had once sat and never quite left. John knew that groove. He'd seen it on old dairy dogs that had outlived 2 owners and a hailstorm. He let the bucket rest. He looked at the dog the way you look at a tractor that still starts even when the choke sticks. With respect. "What's his name?" John asked, still not looking at the man. "Monster," the man said, with that lazy mean some folks carry like a pocket knife. "That ain't a name," John said. He didn't raise his voice. He stood and reached for his wallet. $7 was less than a bag of mineral. He didn't like the way the man smiled when John peeled off the bills, but he handed them over. Anyway, because some things need doing and you can think about fairness later. The man folded the bills, stuck them deep in his jacket, and walked off with the cooler like he was late for something. Around them, the market kept moving. A woman laughed about Basil. A truck backfired near the loading zone. John set the bucket on its base and knelt again. He turned the handle so the open part faced the dog, and he tapped it, just once. The bulldog's nostrils fluttered. John could smell the dog now. Metal, dust, a little bit of tar. The way roadwork clings to fur when a dog has slept under a bridge. "Come on, boy," he said. "We'll call you Lou." He didn't know why the name came, only that it fit in his mouth easy. He clicked his tongue the way you steady a milk stream, and the bulldog shifted. One step, the clatter of his nails on concrete was small, but it sounded like a decision. Another step, slow, like each inch was a test. He paused with his nose at the bucket's rim. People had started to notice. Not loud, just that kind of quiet that gathers when something is going to happen. John didn't turn to them. He kept his voice the size of the space between him and the dog. "That's it," he said. "No one's gonna crowd you." Lou set one paw inside the curve of shadow the bucket made. He waited, muscles tight across his shoulders. Then he slid the other paw forward and stood with his front half tucked behind. The metal, as if the bucket were a door frame and he needed to be inside something to feel okay. His mouth opened a little. He didn't lick. He didn't wag. He just stood there and let 2 inches of his weight belong to this man with a farm voice. "There you go," John said, and only then did he reach, slow as dusk, and let the back of his fingers touch the cheek where the fur was shortest. Warm, a little damp, a heartbeat steady under the skin. Lou did not flinch. Mina came running up the aisle with her sketchbook under her arm and her jacket half-zipped, breath puffing. "Uncle John," she said, then saw the dog and swallowed her next words. She bent her knees without getting closer and spoke like a person who had learnt from bottle calves how to say hello. "Hi, buddy." Lou's eyes held on her for 2 beats, then drifted back to John's hand. He was still refusing the world, but his refusal had a hinge now. "Let's take him home," John said, standing and curling his hand around the bucket handle. He gave it one last, light tapped in, answering Tanand. Lou followed the sound like a path. You can walk with your eyes closed because your feet know the ruts. They crossed the market slow, not a parade, not a rescue, just a man and a dog and a little girl carrying a sketchbook. The mist was thinning. Somewhere a gull yelled at a gull. John opened the passenger door of the farm truck and laid the bucket. On the floorboard, handle forward, an open circle waiting. He tapped it, and Lou gathered himself and climbed in, muscles bunching. A low grunt, like a tired man easing into a pew. Mina buckled in and set her hand near, not on, the dog's paw. Lou looked at it, then at John, then at the windshield. He gave one sigh, the kind that empties a long day. The cardboard sign, left where it had leaned, sagged in the damp, the word on it melting at the corners. John shut the door and slid behind the wheel. "Home's quiet," he said, mostly to fill the space. "Plenty of room to say no until you're ready to say yes." He started the engine. The truck shook once and settled. As they pulled away, John saw, in the side mirror, the man with the cooler watching them go. The toothpick was gone. His mouth was a straight line. John let the mirror swing back to the road. At the first stoplight, he tapped the steering wheel twice with his knuckle and clicked his tongue without thinking. Lou's ear flicked, and for the first time, the dog's eyes turned not away from, but toward, the sound. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was the start of something that felt like a gate opening on hinges that hadn't moved in a long while. The road home wound along ditches bright with buttercups and old fence posts silver with age. By the time John turned up the lane, the sun had pushed the mist back to the treetops. The farmhouse sat square and sensible, white paint scuffed by seasons, porch swing quiet, a wind chime made of mule shoes ticking lightly. Cattle stood hip-deep in green, switching tails. The strawberry tunnel glimmered under plastic like a row of small lakes. John parked by the barn and let the engine idle down. He set the bucket on the floor again, tapped the rim twice, then clicked his tongue not loud. Not coaxing, just a note that said there was no hurry. Lou lifted his head and considered the daylight as if it might ask something of him. He braced, then climbed down, the kind of careful that comes from too many hard surprises. His paws hit gravel with a hollow crunch. "Welcome, fella," John said. "We move slow here." Mina ran ahead to pull the side gate open. "This way," she told the air, as though directions should be given even if a soul wasn't ready to take them yet. Lou followed 2 steps behind John's boot heel, not touching, not straining, like a man walking a fence line he didn't own. Inside the yard, the farm made its usual music, hens gossiping, the milk pump sighing, a hose ticking as it cooled in the shade. Eli pedaled up on a dusty bike. A skinny boy with smart eyes and a drone case bungeed to his rack. "That the Bulldog from the market?" he asked, quick and gentle. "Guy said he was mean. Folks say plenty when they don't know," John answered. "This is Lou." Eli dipped his chin to the dog, the way country kids greet a skittish horse. "Hey, Lou." He parked the bike, then pointed his thumb toward the heifer shed. "Camera I set by the feed alley is acting up. I can fix it after chores." "Fine by me," John said, then nodded to the porch where a blue pickup had just rolled in. Dr. Hannah Park stepped out with a canvas vet bag and that steady look she wore like a jacket. She'd been working the valley long enough to know every calf by the set of its ears and every farmer by the way he worried. "You pick up a project," she said, smiling at John. "Let me guess, no appetite, no eye contact, and sleeps like he's guarding an open door." "That about covers it," John said. "You got 5 minutes to look him over." She squatted a few feet from Lou, turned sideways so her shoulders didn't crowd him, and spoke the way one does to a nervous client. "Afternoon, big man. We'll do nothing you don't agree to." Lou watched her without blinking. His jaw didn't set. It didn't soften either. John fetched a bowl and shook a handful of dry feed into it, not the loud rattle of filling a pail, just enough to speak of food without making it a bargain. He set the bowl down and backed away. Lou stood over it, breathing the smell, then looked up as if to ask whether eating might cost him something. John tapped the bucket once, a small bell of sound, then went silent. The dog lowered his head and took 2 slow mouthfuls. Not joy, not hunger, more like a man tasting soup to be polite. That groove at the neck, Hannah said quietly to John, old collar left too long. Not infected now. He's thin. Teeth tell me he's not a puppy, not yet an old man. Knees are clean. Watch that left shoulder scarred tissue. I'll keep work light, John said. They walked toward the chicken run so Mina could check waterers. Lou paced behind them, scanning the corners, measuring the world. A dark shape exploded from the far side yarder. Neighbors, young husky, who liked to slip fences and brag about it. He barreled toward the pen, tongue hanging, not mean, just full of himself. Mina flinched and grabbed the post. John started to step, but Lou moved first. He planted low, all chest and shoulder, across the narrow path between Mina and the oncoming dog. He didn't bark. He didn't flash teeth. He set himself the way a stump sets in clay and let the husky's speed break around him. The husky skidded, surprised by the wall that hadn't been there a breath ago, then veered off with a foolish yelp and shot back through the gap he'd used to get in. Mina's breath came out in a shaky laugh. He stood like a little tank, she said, one hand still on the post. She reached down but stopped an inch from Lou's back. You good? Lou kept his stance another beat, then eased his weight off, shook once, and sat with his side to Mina, not leaning, just present. The look he gave the empty gate wasn't angry. It was accounting. That's not a bite dog, Hannah said softly. That's a hold the line dog. John felt something unknot in his chest. He crouched and put the back of his hand near Lou's shoulder. Waited until the dog chose to lean that inch that makes the difference between alone and together. Lou didn't, but he didn't leave either. They settled Lou on a rug by the mudroom door, where the afternoon light fell kind. Mina brought a shallow dish of water and set it where a man could reach without standing. Eli tuned his drone on the stoop, rotors chirping like cicadas. Out in the road, a truck eased by, slow enough for the driver to look. John noticed without showing it. Strangers rarely came down this lane unless they meant to. He filed the detail away, the way farmers do next to notes about weather, fuel, and which calf limps after a storm. Try your call again, Hannah said, curious if it works away from the crowd. John tapped the bucket tap. Tap then made the small tongue click. Lou's ear flicked, and his gaze came to the sound like iron to a compass. It wasn't worship. It was recognition. The sound carried a shape he knew. He slid forward and laid his chin across his paws. His breathing evened, long and low. Farm language, Hannah said. Body says yes. Brain says wait and see. Waiting's fine, John answered. We got time. They fed cows at 4, as always. The pump hummed its steady hymn. Mina drew in her sketchbook, quick lines that looked like she could feel the dog under her pencil. Lou slept with one eye thin as a seam. When the evening cooled and the edges of things turned blue, John sat on the step and thought about how some creatures need a word to come home, and some only need a sound that remembers them. He tapped the bucket once more against the wooden tread, a small note that stayed in the air longer than it had any right to. Lou opened both eyes and looked straight at him. If there was a promise in the yard, it was simple as fence wire. We won't push. You won't run. The rest they could build with the tools they had patience, chores, and the old, plain music of a farm that asks nothing louder than necessary. Asterisk. Morning came soft and honest, the kind of light that makes dust look like blessing. John warmed water on the porch stove and carried the enamel tub to the lee side of the barn where wind didn't bite. He set a folded feed sack for his knees, laid out a clean towel, and tested the water with the back of his wrist the way you do for a baby. Lou watched from the shadow of the door, square and still, his eyes measuring every move for cost. "We'll keep it quick," John said. "Warm, steady, no surprises." Mina brought a rubber curry brush and a squeeze bottle with a mild soap Hannah had left for sensitive skin. She wore her oldest sweatshirt, sleeves shoved to the elbows. Eli hovered with a roll of paper towels and the proud air of a boy who intends to be useful. The hens lined the fence like church ladies, craning for news. John didn't pull. He invited. He wet his hands, shook droplets on the step, then on the doormat, making a trail that said nothing bad lived here. He tapped the side of the empty bucket twice and clicked his tongue. Lou's ear tipped toward the sound. He came forward with that careful, testing walk, set his front paws by the tub, and waited for the world to show its hand. The first pour was slow warm water over shoulders. Not the back first, never the face. Steam lifted like a small prayer. Lou didn't lean in. He didn't pull away. He stood like a man at a barbershop chair, trying a new barber, eyes forward. Reading the room, Mina squeezed a thin line of soap along the curry brush. "Hi, Lou," she said. "We go easy." She worked the lather through the short coat, small circles, not pressing where old skin pouted. The dirt let go in long grey threads that swirled down and disappeared. Under the lather, a pale, hairless track showed around the lower necker. Groove where a collar had once dug and lived too long. Mina's hand paused. "That mark's deep," she whispered. "Old," John said. "Healed, but it belonged to him a while." Eli shifted his weight and leaned to look, careful not to crowd. "You think somebody tied him on asphalt? He smells like fresh tar." John pinched a clump of grit between his fingers, black, sticky when warmed by the water. "Road crew tar, or the kind they seal old floors with," he said. He rinsed and found more of it by the elbows and along the belly, as if Lou had slept near a patch that never quite cured. Hannah arrived halfway through, a thermos of tea in one hand and a small kit in the other. She crouched to see the work and nodded with that approving look that makes you believe you're doing fine, even if your hands tell you you're clumsy. "That groove will soften with time and fat," she said. "Shoulders look better now that the matting's out. Let me check his pads when you're done." Mina found something else as the soap thinned. Near the flank, faint lines ran across the hair to narrow bands of faded blue. Not quite dye, not quite paint, as if a brush had kissed him while it was almost dry. "What's that?" she asked. "It looks like numbers that decided not to be numbers." Hannah squinted, then tilted Lou a little with a palm on the hip. "Transport marks," she said. "Some yards stripe animals so they can sort by lot. The color's wrong for cattle. Could be a pallet mark. Could be a man who handles dogs like boxers." The thought sat heavy. John rinsed slow, lips a flat line. He had seen calves with auction paint, moving through like a river of bodies turned into product. He had never liked it, even when it was necessary. Seeing a dog striped like that made the back of his neck hot. They worked the rest of the coat clean and wrapped Lou in the towel, rubbing the way you rub a friend's shoulders after a hard day. Not to hurry, but to say you're here. Hannah lifted each paw, pressed the pads with a thumb, checked nails, looked at the eyes with a small light. Left shoulder's got an old pull, she said. Not new. Range of motion's decent. Pain shows when he pivots quick. Keep turns wide for a while. Lou stood and shook, sending a fine mist onto Mina's sleeves. She laughed in that soft, pleased way folks laugh at small mercies. I can deal with wet, she said. Better than mean. Eli's phone buzzed. He dug it out with soapy fingers and wiped the screen on his shirt. It's Iris, he said. She says a cold container left Pikes after midnight with no driver on the manifest until the gate. Security camera saw a plate, but the log doesn't have a name. She spooked about it. Hannah's mouth flattened. No driver on the manifest is a trick for when you're moving something nobody wants to sign for. John dried his hands and took the phone. Tell her thanks, he said. Ask if she saw a code on the pallet stacks. Eli typed with his thumbs, the way boys read Wind Right Away, eyes sharp. The reply came quick. RBF 14, he read. She says it's chalked on more than one stack. RB for Redwood Bay, John said. F4, frozen. 14 for a route, or a day of the cycle. He handed the phone back. You still have that drone with the thermal camera you used last calving? Eli perked. Yeah, it picks up heat through thin metal. Not thick, but the cheap stuff. Sure, I can fly the yard from the road and see if anything's living where it shouldn't. Do it, John said. From the ditch. And don't be a hero. Eli grinned. I'm never a hero, he said, and took off at a lope toward the bike. The drone case bumping his hip. Hannah finished her look over and clicked her pen. He's sound enough to be a dog, she said. Feed small, often. Let him nap where he can see and not be seen. Keep your voice like fence, wire tight, not loud. Fence wire I got, John said. They let Lou sun dry on the porch mat. He turned his face to the warmth, the way a man turns toward a stove in February slow. Grateful, suspicious, it might be taken away. Mina sat on the top step and sketched him as he dozed, catching the deep crease over his nose and the stubborn tilt of his jaw. John fixed a hinge on the lower gate, oiling it until the squeal was a purr. Ordinary things done right, so the world feels less like a trap. Eli came back after lunch, hair pushed by the wind, cheeks pink. I flew the west fence and the back of Pikes, he said, breath quick. Didn't cross a line, I swear. From the county road you can see the loading bay. There's a trailer backed in with the doors closed. Thin panels. The thermal picked warm spots along the inner wall long afternoon, like something inside kept heat. They shouldn't hold heat that long if it's just empty air. Livestock? John asked. Too small and too spaced, Eli said. Like boxes with warm cores. Like crates. Hannah folded her arms. If Iris has a container leaving at midnight, and your drone catches heat in midday, then there's more than one load or a long hold. Either way, not legal. John looked at Lou, sleeping with his chin on his paws. Clean, lighter in color now that the grime was gone. The pale groove at his neck softened under the towel's press. The faint blue lines near his flank ghosted in and out as the sun shifted. Mina set her pencil down. What do we do? She asked. Call the sheriff. Soon, John said. But if this is wrong in the way I think it's wrong, we need more than a call. We need to know where the door is and who holds the key. He said it like a man who had learned the hard way that knocking on the front doesn't work if the bad room is under the floor. Lou stirred, lifted his head, and looked past them into the dim of the mudroom. He stood, padded inside, and crossed the worn plank in front of the pantry, the one that had a flatter sound when you walked on it. He put his paw on the edge and tapped 1, 2, not scratching, tapping. Then he looked up at John and did it again, 1, 2. John felt the hair rise on his forearms. "You hear that?" he asked, though everyone clearly had. "Like he's calling you to the floor." Mina said, "Why dash I." John stepped in and pressed his boot heel to the board. It gave that dull note a loose plank gives when a house settles. He pried with a putty knife kept for paint and found the nail heads bright from years of traffic. The board lifted a 1/4 inch and stopped, stuck on a bent nail. He eased it back without forcing, then tapped it home again. The sound solid, then a hollowness under. "He's saying look under things," Hannah murmured. "Look where the sound changes." Lou moved to the screen door and tapped the threshold. 1, 2, then turned his head toward the yard like a pointer. He took 5 steps to the porch rail and did it again on the bottom stair. Tap, tap. He wasn't anxious. He was instructing. "What are you telling us, big man?" John asked, following his dance. "Hidden places. False bottoms." Eli swallowed. "The loading bay at Pikes has a funny echo when the forklift passes," he said. "You can hear it on the drone audio. A kind of hollow under the concrete. I thought it was a bad pad. Now it feels like a room." John looked from the dog to the boy to the road that ran toward town. A thin wind slid through the elm and lifted the corner of an old feed calendar tacked by the door. He felt the shape of the next move as surely as he felt the shape of a good tool in the hand. "Mina," he said, "you help Hannah set a corner for Lou inside where he can see the door and the yard both. Soft blanket, water, and that bucket where he likes it. Eli, charge your batteries. If Iris can meet us, we'll walk the lane by Pikes before dark and listen for hollows. No trespass, ears open. If we're right, we call it in with more than words." Lou lowered himself by the doorway again, eyes on John. Calm in that bulldog way that looks like stubbornness but is really resolve. He blinked slow, then touched the threshold once more. 1, 2, as if to bless the plan or mark the spot where fear lifts and work begins. Evening leaned closer. The light went from gold to the color of old linen. Somewhere in the distance, a truck geared down on the highway, long and low, like a thought changing its mind. John set his hat firm and, without fuss, gathered what he needed. Flashlight, notebook, the old pocket level that had told him more truths about crooked floors than any fancy gadget. He slid the bucket under his arm out of habit and gave the rim a quiet tap-tap. Lou's ear flicked. The hens settled. The wind chime of mule shoes ticked once and went still. The farm had told them what it knew. The rest waited down the road, where men wrote codes on pallets and believed nobody was listening for the sound underneath. They waited for the day to fold itself small. By dusk, the fields looked stitched with shadow, and the road to town ran like a dark belt across the low ground. Iris parked 2 blocks from Pike's cold storage, her old sedan tucked behind a stack of pallets at the cop so no one would see 4 people and a dog step out together. She wore a dock clerk's jacket and the kind of worry that doesn't waste words. "Power flickers after 11, she said, handing John a notepad with time scribbled in pencil. They switched to a little diesel box by the mill. Lights on when there's no reason for lights. We walk, John said. Ditches and easements only. We're not heroes. Eli shouldered his drone bag, eyes bright and jumpy. Hannah zipped her vest and clipped a small flashlight to the pocket, the beam hooded with red tape so it wouldn't shout in the dark. Lou moved at John's knee, a square, quiet presence. John didn't leash him. The dog's steadiness felt truer than rope. They took the back lane that ran behind a string of tin-roofed sheds. Night smelled like wet plywood and old grain. Freight cars sat on a rusted siding as if the last job they'd done had tired them out for good. In the distance, a generator coughed to life and settled into a low, patient thrum. "That'll be it," Iris said. Mills to the left of the cold dock, through the willow break. They slipped into the narrow cut where a ditch ran shallow under drooping branches. John's boots found the old tractor ruts by memory, the way a hand finds a seam in a quilt. Lou paused now and then to lift his head, not sniffing so much as listening. Twice he flicked his ear and tapped a toe to the earth one. And turned to make sure John had seen. John answered with the quietest tap of the bucket rim against his thigh. The sound stitched them together. They reached the back of the feed mill just before 11. Tin siding rose tall and blank, patched where storms had pulled at it. A service door sat crooked in its frame, through a seam at the sill. A ribbon of light fell thin across the weeds. Eli set the drone on a low concrete ledge, his hands sure even when his breath ran fast. The small craft lifted with a moth's whisper and hovered tight to the wall. He sent it along the seam where roof met skin, then down toward the dock bay. On his phone, a green wash of thermal bled shapes into meaning, a warm rectangle where a door should have been cold by now. A bright bar like a pipe running too hot. A cloud of small, steady embers close together. Heat signatures, Eli murmured. Too many, too even, too small for people. Crates, Hannah said. Living things jammed in boxes give you neat little coals. John pressed his palm to the siding. The metal hummed with the generator's heartbeat. He leaned, listening the way he listens to a grain bin for the slide of trapped corn. He heard fans. He heard a belt, and under that, a second thump, faint and irregular, like something bumping wood from inside. Lou stepped up to the service door and set his paw on the threshold. Tap, tap. He looked at John, then at the dark seam. His body was not tense. It was ready, doors chained on the inside, Iris whispered. There's a window panel at the boiler room. I used to sign deliveries there. They circled to a small, high square patched with wire and paint. The bottom pane was cracked and put back in years ago, a poor job. Hannah slid a putty knife under the putty, lifted the edge, and turned the pane out like she was opening an old book. A breath of air came through, wet with bleach and feed dust. John eased his shoulders through the hole and dropped inside, then reached back to steady Hannah. Eli passed the drone. Iris stayed at the window to keep watch and call if a truck rolled in. Lou gathered himself and sprung up with a grunt, front paws on the sill. John hooked his forearms under the dog's chest and lifted the rest of him through. Lou took the landing with knees bent, then stood, breathing even. Inside smelled like work that had been done wrong for a long time. A line of bulb cages ran the ceiling, 2 lit, 3 dark shadows lying in strips between light-like planks. The concrete floor bore old auger scars. To the right, a wall of plywood stood too clean for a place this tired. No scuffs, no marks, as if the wall had been put there by men who didn't move grain. Lou went to that wall and tapped low. Tap, tap. Then he pressed his shoulder to it like a wrestler, testing a man's balance. The wall gave a soft, muffled answer, hollow, force. John said. Hannah found a row of shiny screws along the baseboard where someone had rushed. A little crooked, a little proud of their work. They don't expect visitors with patience, she said. She drew a small pry bar from her kit. Farm vets carry tools. No one asks about and popped the first board enough to see the truth. A slide track. John slipped his hands into the edge and leaned his weight. The panel eased, left with a wooden wood sigh. The room behind was low and mean, built under the old loading platform where trucks had once backed and rattled. It held metal cages, some stacked, some side by side, each the size of a calf hutch and twice as unforgiving. The generator fed a fan that fed a duct that whispered cool air into the space. On the concrete, a shallow trench carried runoff to a floor drain that had no business in a feed room. Lord help, Iris breathed from the window, her voice thin as wind. They made a kennel out of a coffin. Hannah squeezed John's forearm knot to stop him, to keep him from falling into his own anger. Count, she said. Count and breathe. They moved along the line, eyes on hinges and latches, not touching what might be evidence. Some cages were empty, door wires bent from old fights. Two held bowls with crusted feed, dried hard. One held a blanket, filth pressed flat into the weave. The third from the left held nothing but a nylon strap, frayed and stained, its stitching still strong where the fabric hadn't been rubbed raw. When John lifted it with 2 fingers, he saw letters along the belly of the strap, puckered but legible. County Stockyard Calm Dog. Hannah said the words with him, low. They took a yard dog, she said. A steady one, trained to keep animals from panicking. And they broke him into a tool for moving more animals. Or they stole his language, John said, his jaw tight. A sound rose from the far corner, so soft it might have been the mill cooling after a long day. Lou turned, head up, and trotted short toward it, his nails making that small piano on the floor. He stopped at a cage, half in shadow, and put his nose to the latch. Tap, tap. John brought his light. The beam red-hooded, but enough 2 pups lay curled like commas in the back corner. Brown and white both, so thin their feet looked too big. Their eyes opened when the light brushed them, wary but not wild. One lifted its head and made a sound like a hiccup. The other tried to stand and got as far as his elbows before running out of sense. We don't touch yet, Hannah said, breath steady. We look, we note, we take pictures. Eli, who had been quiet because he wanted to do this right, raised the drone and snapped stills with the little camera, the shutter whispering like moth wings. He shot tags, hinges, the false wall track, the strap with its stitched words, the pups from 2 angles. Good, Hannah said. She knelt and offered the back of her hand to the air near the pups, not pressing sent in, just letting presence be known. Hey babies, she murmured. You found the wrong men, but you found the right night. John tapped the bucket rim once, the sound smaller in the tight space. Lou stepped back half a foot to leave room, then did something none of them expected. He lay down in front of the cage with his body against the door, chest to the bars, chin on the concrete. He didn't whine. He breathed the way a metronome ticks. The tremor under the pup's ribs settled 1 notch. That's his job, Hannah said softly. He's doing the thing he was made to do. A wheel clanked in the distance, metal hitting a lip. Iris hissed from the window. Truck, one only. From the south road, Lights off. Time, John said. The word came out calm, because anything else would be wrong. We slide this shut, go out the way we came, and call it in from the far ditch. We got what we need to speak plain. Hannah stood and eased the panel along the track until the seam was a seam again, not a doorway. Eli tucked the drone under his shirt. Iris slipped the glass back into its poor bed and pressed the putty until it held. John boosted Lou through, then took Hannah's hand and followed. Breath held where a man's breath takes up too much space. They made the willows as the truck rolled in. A low white box with the Pike logo rubbed off by time, only the shadow of letters left. It bumped the dock and braked with a sigh. Two men climbed down and stretched like they were sore from easy work. One lit a cigarette and cupped it against the wind. The other took a key on a lanyard and turned toward the service door. Plates, Eli whispered. Phone lifted just enough to catch the numbers. Iris spoke them back like a prayer to remember. Hannah's fingers worked at the edge of a label she'd peeled from a pocket alcohol. Wipe until glue stuck to her gloves' small nerves, finding something to do that wouldn't make noise. Lou didn't growl. He leaned into John's leg and looked up, as if to ask whether the next sound should be the bucket or the phone. John set the bucket on the ditch bank and tapped it once. Then he pulled his cell and dialed the number that puts duty on the line and makes it listen. The dispatch that wakes a deputy and sends him to a back road where a feed mill hums when it shouldn't. He kept his voice level, not excited. He gave directions any old-timer could follow. West Lane, Willow Break, Tin Mill with the warped door. We've got probable cause of animal confinement and a false wall, he said. Thermal shows heat where no heat should be. We have photographs. We'll meet you at the culvert by County 6. Stay put, the dispatcher said, which everyone knows means move to the safest place you can stand and still be useful. They eased along the ditch, low and slow, until the willow fingers let go. The stars were thin, stitched into the high dark like beads. John tapped the bucket one last time before he stowed it under his arm. Lou's ear flicked and his stride matched John's, square and certain. Good work. John said to all of them, and to the night itself, for opening a door where a wall had been. We go home for an hour. We drink something hot. Then we come back with people whose job it is to turn false walls into evidence and cages into empty space. Lou looked back once at the mill and then forward again, a hand's breadth ahead of John's knee. The road to the farm felt longer going out than it had coming in. But it carried the same old truth. You don't need to shout to be heard if you've got the right language. On some nights, that language is 2 taps on a bucket and the steady breath of a bulldog who remembers what calm is for. Dawn found the farmhouse blue and quiet. The kind of morning that starts with coffee and a promise to keep whatever was good about last night. John set the kettle on, wiped the mud from his boots with the side of the step, and listened to the place wake. Cows shuffled. A towhee ticked in the hedge. Lou lay by the mudroom threshold with his chin on his paws, watching the line where light slid across the floor as if daylight were a thing you could measure with patience. Hannah came early, carrying a folder and a loaf of sweetbread wrapped in a towel. Because bad work requires evidence and good mornings require something warm. She spread papers on the table, a photocopy of an old county memo about stockyard protocols, a printout of a training flyer from years back, a photo she'd taken of the nylon strap with its stitched words. Mina perched on a chair, swinging her socks, hair still damp from a hasty braid. Eli leaned against the doorframe with his drone case like a guitar. "Calm dog," Hannah said, tapping the strap photo. "Not a pet, not a biter, not a chaser. He moves through noise and smell and panic and settles the herd by being the quietest body in the room." Some yards used them every week. Most folks never saw the work because when it's done right, nothing dramatic happens. Mina glanced down at Lou. He blinked slow, looking almost like he was bored, which is what calm looks like when you don't know better. "So he was doing a job," she said, respectful. "Looks that way," Hannah said. "And somebody took that job and turned it into a trick for moving more animals that didn't have a choice." John poured coffee, the kind that tastes best out of a chipped mug. "Explains the bucket," he said. "Explains why he won't follow a word but follows a cadence. Farm language. Language remembers," Hannah said. "Bodies remember." Mina slid off the chair and sat cross-legged on the floor. She set her sketchbook aside and folded both hands in her lap, palms up. "Hey, Lou," she said, "not baby sweet, just steady. I'm going to read the way Uncle John talks to the cows. If you don't like it, you can look away." She took a breath and began, slow as a lullaby, counting a beat like walking fence. "Easy now. Easy now. We're all right. Easy now." Lou turned his head and put one paw across the other, an old man gesture that looked borrowed from a porch swing. He didn't move closer. He didn't blink off. He just let the sound draw a circle around him. When Mina finished, he exhaled through his nose and let his jaw hang loose for half a second, relief measured in inches. "That's a yes," Hannah said, mouth soft. As plain as any handshake. Eli lifted the drone case. "I can fly the lane again at noon," he said. "If they're holding animals too long in their heat, we'll stack up." Also, Iris texted, "She's scrubbing the manifests. Says RBF won 4 shows 3 times in the last 8 days. That's too many for legitimate farm equipment, if you ask me." "Tell her thank you and to keep her head down," John said. "We don't want Pike sniffing where we're sniffing." They ate slices of bread, thick as book spines, and planned the rest of the day. Chores, a stop by the cop for baler twine, a visit to the sheriff with the photos and to clear sentences, no more than needed. Life braided duty and breakfast together as it tends to do. Mid-morning, a truck eased into the driveway without the courtesy of a horn. It rolled past the mailbox and idled by the hay shed, engine talking in that low, expensive way. Darren Pike climbed out slow, hands empty, smile polite as a salesman at a funeral. He wore a vest over a clean shirt and boots too new to be his. He looked at everything and nothing. "John," he said, as if they were old friends who always forgot each other's birthdays. "Heard you might have extra round bales after the last cutting. Thought I'd take to off you for cash, help you clear the barn aisle. I don't list inventory on the road," John said, amiable. "What I've got is spoken for by my own cows." He didn't move from the porch step. Pike shaded his eyes and pretended to study the roofline. "Heard your niece is drawing horses these days," he said, light as salt on watermelon. "Mina, right? Bus stop by the bend where the blackberries are always thick. That hedge is a mess come September." Mina, who'd come to the door without thinking, froze with her fingers on the screen. John felt her stop and put one hand behind him to signal stay. He let his voice go even flatter, the way a road goes flat before a bridge. "You got business. Do it straight, Darren," he said. "If you've come to look, look at me. If you've come to buy, the answer's no." Pike smiled like they were talking about weather. No harm in being neighborly, he said. His gaze slid to the mudroom where Lou's blocky head was visible, chin on the rug. "That your bulldog from the market, monster." Fella at the stall said he was trouble. "Folks say plenty when they don't have to sign their names to it," John said. He didn't look at Lou. "We're done here." For a second, something sour showed under Pike's grin, then smoothed. He lifted both hands in a gesture that had never kept anyone safe and stepped back toward his truck. "I'll let you get back to it," he said. "Busy week. A lot moving." He glanced at Mina once more than a man needs to, then climbed in and rolled away. Gravel crunching like bones under tires. The sound of the engine faded down the lane. Nobody spoke. A breeze wandered across the porch and went out again as if it had changed its mind about visiting. John turned, shoulders still, and crouched so he could look Mina level. "You don't change your life for a man like that," he said. "You change your habits a touch. You don't walk alone. You walk with me or Hannah or Eli. If you see that truck twice, you come inside and call my name. And you keep drawing." He laid his palm open. "Fear doesn't get your pencil." Mina nodded, not squeezing back because that would be a promise she didn't understand yet. "Okay," she said. Her face was pale but set. She looked at Lou. "We're okay." Lou stood and stepped forward that single inch he'd withheld the day before. He put his shoulder against John's shin and held his ground, a small weight, a plain vow. The kind of presence that makes a porch feel like a fortress without any boards nailed up. Hannah let out the breath she'd been saving. "We take the folder to the sheriff after lunch," she said. "I'll call ahead so we're not telling the story to a desk. We'll ask for someone who understands warrants and isn't afraid of a bolt cutter." Eli checked his watch, and then the sky, a boy's way of saying he's measuring day by both machines and weather. "I'll fly the west side again and send Iris heat maps," he said. "If they're loading while the tide turns, she'll know when they have to move." John stood, set the bucket by the door, and tapped it once, not for the dog so much as for himself. Tap. Lou's ear flicked anyway. They went at the day with a kind of quiet that wasn't surrender. John fixed the hinge on the south gate and ran the water trough until the algae line washed clean. Mina sat on the porch and practiced her slow cadence, reading to no one and to the whole place. "Easy now. Easy now. We're all right." Lou lay where he could hear her and see the road. Eli biked the section line with the drone in his backpack, stopping under cottonwoods to send the craft up and over. Hannah drove to the clinic to pull the old county memo that said you can't store live animals in a room built for grain. Not now, not ever. By late afternoon, the heat had shaken itself out of the air. The sky turned the pale color you get behind a good apple slice. Iris texted that a second RBF-14 tag had appeared on a pallet stack by Pikes, chalk fresh, smudged by a left hand. That meant another load. That meant time wasn't on anyone's side. John washed his hands at the pump and dried them on the seat of his jeans. He looked at the bucket and the dog and the long line of fence that held the herd. He thought about how men build the wrong rooms and give them nice names, and how sometimes the only right thing you can do is speak a language that reminds creatures they're more than a number. He picked up the folder Hannah had left on the table, slid the photos inside, and added a page in his own blocky hand. False wall, thermal, strap, pups, time, plate. "Let's go tell it plain," he said. Lou rose, as if a bell had rung, not eager, not dragging, just willing. Mina closed her sketchbook and set it on the chair with the pencil tucked inside. Eli rolled the drone cord neat and tight. Hannah pulled back into the drive with the look of someone who had the line in the statute and was ready to read it. They stepped off the porch together, the farm behind them steady as bedrock. The day had bent toward evening, and the shadows of 4 people and 1 bulldog stretched long across the yard. Lou paced just ahead of John's knee, ears at half-mast, eyes forward. He had refused a world that didn't speak right. Now, in this smaller world, with its taps and clicks and gentle counting, he moved like a creature who had always known how to go first when the ground was uncertain, and to stand still when a child needed a wall. The sheriff's office smelled like old paper and floor wax, a courthouse smell that makes a man pick his words with care. A deputy in a tan shirt brought them into a small room where the blinds were tilted to let in light but not attention. John set the folder on the table. Hannah laid her state handbook beside it, and Eli balanced the drone case on his knees like a book he wasn't sure he had permission to open. Mina sat very straight and did not swing her feet. They told it plain. False wall. Thermal heat where no heat should be. Photos of cages, hinges, the stitched strap that didn't belong in any feed room. The deputy, a woman with crow's feet earned in daylight, didn't interrupt. When they finished, she looked at each of them the way a medic looks at faces after a crash, deciding who's bleeding inside. You brought evidence, not just anger, she said. That helps. But I need a legal foot to stand on if I'm walking into a business with a warrant. Hannah slid the handbook forward and rested a fingertip on 2 lines she'd tabbed with yellow tape. No live confinement in rooms not built or permitted for that purpose. No transport without water, ventilation, and record of care. If you need probable cause, you have veterinary eyes on neglect, documentation of concealment, and heat signatures consistent with live cargo held in an unapproved space. The deputy read fast and nodded once. I can wake a judge for a telewarrant, she said. He's a cattleman. He'll understand the false wall. I'll need a short statement from each of you and the photos emailed to this address. She wrote a contact on a sticky note and slid it across. We staged near the willow break. No sirens till we're in the door. Eli cleared his throat. There's a second load coming, he said. Iris says the tag RBF14 is on 2 stacks, chalk fresh. Tide tables put a window at dawn. If they move then, they'll hit the wharf on a high flood and roll straight onto a barge. You certain about that? The deputy asked. I'm certain about the tide, Eli said, and found a small smile. And Iris has the manifests. She's careful. The deputy stood. All right. I'll build the paper. You keep breathing. No cowboy stunts. If I tell you to stay behind glass, you do it. Back at the farm, the evening came in on cat feet and sat on the porch rail. John warmed stew and set 3 bowls on the table without asking who was hungry. Mina ate with small, determined bites and then practiced her slow voice for Lou in the doorway, counting like fence posts. Easy now. Easy now. We're all right. Lou rested his chin on her shoelace and breathed in time with her words. Outside, the windmill turned lazy. Iris texted just after 9. Come by the Cooper loan, the message read. I have something you'll want. John found her near the back dock, under a yellow light that hummed like a big fly. She held a palm-sized recorder, the cheap kind a clerk uses to dictate when the computer decides to be stubborn. I left this in Pike's office shack, she said, voice low. Forgot it on purpose. When he made me sign for a pallet, he wouldn't let me see. It records over itself every 6 hours unless you save. I saved. She clicked play. The recording was plain as a hammer. A room, a chair scrape, the tinny echo of a small space. Then the sound came to quick taps, like metal on metal, followed by a single tongue click. A pause. The pattern again. Breath. A man's voice, not Pike's, saying, "All right now," like he was talking about hay bales, not hearts. Then more taps, spaced like in the background, the barest ripple of whimpering, steadying as the cadence went on. "That's your bucket code," Iris said. "They use it to move the dogs quiet so the men on the night shift don't ask questions." John felt heat rise behind his eyes, the kind that doesn't burn, exactly, but strips paint. "We keep the file safe," he said, "and we don't say your name unless a judge asks for it and can keep it." "You've done more than enough." Iris nodded, jaw tight. "I'll be at the wharf office when you need me," she said, "with the manifests, and I'll leave the side. Door open if I can." He drove home with the recorder in the glove box and the idea of the sound in his pocket, the same code he'd tapped his entire life to call cattle and comfort confused calves. It wasn't magic. It was repetition, steadiness, the body remembering what follows what. That men had taken it and turned it to their dark logistics felt like finding a prayer stitched onto a thief's mask at the farm. They laid a map of the valley on the kitchen table and built a simple plan. Not brave, not clever, solid. Hannah drew a line from Pikes to the wharf with the side of her hand. "They'll go this way," she said. County 6 to the spur, past the cope. 1 truck, maybe 2. "I'll ride with the deputy." "We go first. I take the ditch by the willow break with the drone," Eli said. "No crossing lines. I can feed the deputy live thermal if we get in range. I'll be where I can see but not be seen," Iris said on speaker. "By the scale house. I'll call the moment they key the lock. Mina, you stay in the truck with me until the deputy says different," John said, looking at her full on. "We're not there to be first. We're there to be steady. Your voice is for after the door is open. Lou will be with us. He'll do the standing still part. That's as important as any heroics." Mina's mouth went flat, the brave kind, not the stubborn kind. "Okay," she said. "I can hold a book and I can hold my breath. I'll do the first one." They slept in patches. John dozed in the chair by the door with his boots on, a habit from 100 carving seasons. Mina curled with her sketchbook as a pillow and 3 pencils lined like fence posts. Eli set alarms for every hour and got up to check the batteries again because boys who watch screens also watch over what they love. Hannah slept in her truck under a blanket in the sheriff's lot so she could be the first knock on the judge's door at 4. Lou settled between the door and the world. When raccoons chittered at the compost pile, he lifted his head, decided the farm could handle itself, and let the night climb over him like a warm coat. By 4:30, the valley was a bowl of ink. Stars thinned. A tractor grumbled somewhere far off. The deputy called with news as clean as a bell. Warrant signed. Meet at the willow break in 30. Keep your lights low. They pulled onto County 6 in a little convoy Hana with the deputy, John's truck a field length back. Eli on the shoulder with a reflective strap and the drone in a sling like a strange bird. Iris texted one word from the wharf. Open. It meant the gate. It meant the day. They settled under the willows where the ditch runs quiet even when the rest of the county is loud. The deputy checked her radio and took a breath like a swimmer before a cold lake. "We go when I say," she told them. "No drama, no running. We're not here to scare. We're here to stop." Headlights rolled low from the south, a white box with the ghost of a logo. It didn't rush. Men who think they own the road never do. It bumped the dock and sighed. The backup beeper chirped like a sick bird. A second rig idled to lots down, waiting its turn. A patience that spoke of practice. Iris's voice cracked softly over the phone. "They're opening the side bay," she said. "To inside." "I don't see Pike." "That means he thinks he doesn't have to be here. Or he trusts men who owe him," Hannah said, already walking, the deputy at her shoulder. John stayed with Mina in the cab. He could feel Lou's weight against his shin, a warm, certain thing. He looked at Mina and she looked back. The two of them, a matched set, one with a bucket and one with a book. He tapped the bucket rim once and held the sound in his chest. "Easy now," Mina whispered to the morning. "We'll be there when the door opens." At the dock, the deputy lifted her hand and men looked up because authority, when it arrives, quiet and lawful, has a way of rewriting a room. Hannah spoke first, voice low but with the kind of steel that keeps bridges from falling. "County warrant," she said. "We're going to look where the wall pretends to be a wall." A flock of gulls started up from the far pier, white against the grey, as if the day itself were ready to fly or fight. John watched and kept his place. A farmer's patience braced against a thief's hurry. In the seat beside him, the little bulldog who once refused every hand laid his head across the bucket handle and waited for the only thing he had ever trusted: a clean signal, a steady cadence, one voice telling the body there was a way through. The fog came in from the bay like wool pulled across a window, soft and thick enough to keep secrets. The wharf lights made little halos that didn't reach far, and somewhere a buoy bell tapped a steady note as if the water itself owned a clock. The white box truck sat tight to the dock, engine idling low, exhaust lifting and flattening. A second rig waited down the row, patient as a cow at milking time. It was the hour when men with nothing to hide sleep, and men with something to move do it quiet. From the willow break, Eli eased the drone up, kept it below the line of light so it wouldn't silhouette. The tiny craft purred into the fog and vanished. On his phone, the thermal view bloomed, greens and pale yellows smoothing into shape. The dock face, the thin warm seam of a door, a brighter bed along the inner wall where insulation should have kept the heat flat. He pinched the screen and found small, even coals, spaced like boxes with breathing inside them. "Heat again," he said, keeping his voice down. "Same pattern as the mill. Back walls too warm for this time of morning." The deputy gave one nod, radio at her shoulder, alive but quiet. "We go on my count," she said. 2 inside, per Iris, 1 in the cab. "Watch your footing. No one runs. We make simple things simple." Hannah pulled on gloves and tucked her hair behind her ears. Her face held that steadiness she wore when a colt was stuck and needed hands that didn't flinch. She lifted the folder with the warrant, the paper already creased from being read more than once, and waited beside the deputy. Iris's voice pressed thin through John's phone from the scale house, low and close. "Side bay is open," she said. "They've got a pallet jack staged. I still don't see Pike." John sat in the farm truck with Mina and Lou, exactly where he'd promised, close enough to move when told, far enough not to spook what didn't need spooking. He tapped the bucket rim once and felt the sound in his chest. Lou's ear flicked, and he laid his chin across the handle, weight settling. Mina held her book open to the first page and whispered to warm her voice, counting slow under her breath the way a person counts fence posts. 1, 2, easy now. The deputy stepped from the shadow and showed the paper. She didn't wave it, she held it like a tool. County warrant, she said. We're going to open what's shut and see what's hidden. Keep your hands where I can call them by name. One man flinched, then lifted his palms. The other looked at his shoes, the posture of a hired back trying not to learn what the head has planned. Hannah went straight for the plywood. Seemed she could spot blind now. She touched the baseboard with her boot toe and felt the hollow under it, like a lie under a politeness. Tracks here, she said. False wall. The deputy slid her bolt cutter forward one link at a time and found the chain that pretended to be decoration. 2 snips and the chain sagged like old ivy. The pallet jack rattled in from the side with a whip of motion that didn't belong to the 2 men by the door. Its handles jerked, swung wide, and then a forklift's fork nose showed through the fog, paint-scuffed teeth, nicked. The machine rolled out hard and cut across the space between the deputy and the wall, engine coughing a black ribbon of smoke. The driver's vest was clean, the boots too new for overtime. He never looked at the paper. He looked at the people like they were pallets to be moved. John knew that posture before the fog parted enough to show the face. Pike rode low behind the column, one hand on the wheel, the other on the lift control, eyes narrowed against the light. He feathered the lever, dipped the fork 3 inches, and nosed the tip at the seam where the false wall slid. Not a ramming move, a cornering move. A man thinking he could pinch them back into legal grey and call it a misunderstanding. Hold, the deputy said, palm out. You advance that machine and we call it assault. Pike's mouth bent into what some towns mistake for a grin and poor towns know as trouble. The fork inched. The fog made halos at the headlamps and turned his little show into theatre. Somewhere behind him, the man in the cab leaned out the window like he might call a warning if the wind was right. He didn't. John, Mina whispered, and he could hear her swallow. He's aiming for the wall. John didn't answer. He tapped the bucket twice, crisp. The way you speak to stock when one animal starts a shove and the crowd threatens to surge. Tap, tap. Lou stood, not with a rush, with purpose. He hopped from the truck and landed in that Bulldog way square, knees easy, shoulder ready. John stepped out his door and came to the edge of the loading line, but no farther. He didn't point. He didn't wave. He clicked his tongue once. A small sound that cut tidy through engine noise and morning fog. Lou trotted to the angle between the forklift and the wall, all chest and resolve, and planted. He didn't bark. He didn't show teeth. He set his body sideways like a chalk block and looked at the driver the way a good dog looks at an excited steer. You can choose to stop, or you can learn what stopping feels like with all this quiet weight in your way. For a moment, nothing moved. The engine rattled. Fog slid across the dock. Gulls called out of sight. Pike's knuckles shifted on the control lever. He could bump and nudge and say it was a mistake. He could shove and make it a mess the deputy would have to write paper around. Or he could read the room and learn what calm can do when it stands in the exact wrong place for trouble. Don't be a fool, the deputy said, not loud, not kind. Step down. Show me your hands. I have the judge on my phone if you want scripture read to you at this hour. Pike breathed through his teeth, a sound like wind under a door. He paused long enough for choice to be real, then lifted his foot from the throttle and let the fork settle with a hiss. He set the brake, not because he meant to, but because machinery and habit sometimes make better decisions than men. He climbed down slow, palms forward in that old, false, neighborly way. The deputy turned him with 2 fingers and put plastic on his wrists, and his boots made the sound of pride sticking to deck boards. Hannah didn't wait for speeches. She slid the wall on its track, muscles steady, and the dock air changed. The way a room changes when a front door opens after a long storm. Cool met cool, and the smell hit metal, bleach, fear, the coppery edge of too many breaths in too small a space. She crouched, not touching what the law would weigh later, and looked in. Dogs, she said. 15, maybe 20. Small pens. Bowls dry. She reached for the emergency latch on the nearest cage, the kind you pop with a squeeze meant for people, not paws. It stuck, then gave. A pair of eyes caught the light, then another pair behind them. Then a tremble ran through the whole set of cages, not wagging, not panic. Something between that has no word except almost. Mina had the door open before John told her to go. Because the plan had always been, once the door opened, Mina would read. She stood on the truck step where she could be seen and not be in the way, and she opened her book to the first page, like a nurse reciting a prayer for sore places. Easy now, she said, voice small and level. Easy now. We're all right. Easy now. She counted time with her breath, and the fog counted with her. And even the gulls seemed to quiet their fussing. Lou held his post until the deputy waved him off. He stepped back to paces, not far, just enough to give the law clean air. Then he walked to the open seam and laid down with his chest against the track, same as he had at the mill, a square warm thing a body could aim for. The dogs nearest him, a little brindle and a tan one with a white chin, leaned their noses toward his heat and steadied, their shivers dropping like rain off a tin roof. Eli fed the thermal to the deputy's phone and pointed with 2 fingers when the second rig rolled, idling down beside the first. The driver climbed out slow, eyes wide, hands lifted in the universal language of not my idea. The deputy's backup slid in from the far end of the pier, uniforms softened by fog, radios clicking soft. No sirens, no shouting. Just the sound of locks surrendering and paper being read to men who hadn't counted on the day beginning this way. Hannah moved like a mechanic at a barn raising, quick and exact. Water now, she said, and Iris was already at the hose, having found the spigot with the sure nose of a woman who lives around pipes. Bowls filled, lips dipped, tongues worked, the first swallow always too fast, the second better. Hannah checked gums and eyes with her little light and called numbers to the deputy. Without sounding like numbers, John didn't do much. He held the bucket and let Mina own the sound the dogs needed most. He watched Pike over the raft of small lives and saw the man's face settle into something that looked like a ledger being balanced. Not regret, not shame. A summing. Don't look at him, John said to Mina, not because she was but because he wanted the words in the air like a fence. You look at your page. They can learn by your voice. She nodded and read the same line again, slower, sweeter. Because sweetness is not weakness when it fixes what rough hands broke. Lou blinked sleepy and kept time with her breaths, his ribcage lifting and falling like a small bellows. The deputy pointed at a control box by the dock, bracing. "What's that feed?" she asked. "Hydraulics for the sliding floor in the bay," Iris said, finding words she hadn't wanted to know. "That's how they hide the hold. Drop it when they need to look like a regular load. Photograph it," the deputy said. "Tag it. We'll have a county man shut it off." Eli caught the panel, the hoses, the serial plate. Each picture framed like a drawing in a school book. No drama, just facts. He sent the set to the deputy's phone, and then to Hannah's and to John's 3 places. Because one place is how things get lost. He looked at Mina and Lou and felt something click into place in his own ribs. A steadying, like when a bike finds its balance and you realize the wobble was fear, not physic. Fog thinned. Morning pushed a grey light over the water and put a faint rim of silver on every rail. Sounds sharpened, the slap of a line on a piling, the stick of tape as an officer sealed a door for evidence. The small size of creatures settling into a new truth. One of the dogs in the second row nosed the latch and made a soft question. Hannah popped it and let the nose come through into a palm that had held uncounted headaches and would hold a few more before lunch. John tapped the bucket once. "Just because." Lou flicked his ear. "Just because." Mina closed her book and opened it again and began the line from the top. "Because that is how you build a bridge, one plank, then another. All of them held together by a rhythm the body believes." Out on the road, traffic picked up. A fisherman's truck rattled by with a length of rope in the bed and a coffee cup in the holder. He slowed, took in what he could through the fog, and kept going. Because a man can tell when a thing is being handled by hands that know the difference between loud and strong. John let himself take one long breath and feel the gnarled knot under his breastbone loosen a turn. They weren't done. They had names to learn, papers to sign, evidence to box, and the bigger map to figure where other trucks went, who stood behind men like Pike, how far the chalk marks traveled. But they had found the door and opened it in the right way. And in the middle of a dock built for fish and freight, a little bulldog who had refused every hand until he heard the right cadence lay on cold steel and warmed it, turning a hidden bay into a place a dog could walk out of without running. "Ready," the deputy said to Hannah, and her voice carried the next step. "Let's open the rest." The first scene gave, and the room breathed out. Metal cooled under new air. Dogs blinked at a light they could finally understand. Hannah worked the nearest latches in a rhythm, pop and slide, her gloves squeaking on wire. Iris ran the hose low and patient, tipping bowls so no one gulped wrong. The deputy's radio murmured names, unit numbers, the dull comfort of procedure. Fog thinned to a sift. Morning laid a pewter shine along the rails. Pike stood, cuffed by the post, jaw set like a bolt you can't turn with a clean wrench. The driver from the second rig sat on the curb, with his hands flat on his thighs, eyes gone soft, saying yes ma'am and no sir to anyone who looked his way. The other dockhand, a wiry fellow with a neck like twine, shifted his weight as if his boots had nails in them. He watched the forklift like a man missing his only friend. "Sir," the deputy said to him without looking up, "your name?" "Rowe," he muttered. "Clem Rowe." "You're going to stand still," she said. "Standing still makes this easier than the last thing you did." He tried a smile, found nothing in it, and let it drop. His eyes slid toward the forklift controls and back again. Lou saw the glance before anyone else did. He rose, crossed 2 steps, and lay down square across the path to the machine. He didn't stare. He didn't dare. He just became a weight that turned a bad idea into a slow breath. Rowe exhaled and put his palms up. Good choices sometimes need a nudge made of dog. Hannah reached the second row of cages. Small faces pressed the wire, then pulled back, unsure of this new kindness. Mina kept her place on the truck step and read the same line as if reading it could lay boards over a cold gap. Easy now, easy now. We're all right. Her voice evened the room in a way laws can't. John set the bucket just so, tapped it once, and let silence hold the rest. Control box is here, Iris called from under the dock, bracing. Hydraulics for a sliding floor. Shut-off's got a lock, but the lock's a joke. She pulled the pin with a twist, and the pump wound down, a machine giving up its lie. The deputy nodded, made a note with the perfunctory air of a woman who has written worse things on worse mornings, and pointed to the evidence tape. An officer sealed the box like a baker ties string, neat and sure. Office shack, John said. He'll keep papers where steam can't curl. Do it, the deputy answered. With me. They crossed the dock to the little plywood room that held a desk, a coffee ring the size of a horseshoe, and a calendar 3 months back. John opened drawers with 2 fingers, as if each handle had teeth. In the second, a binder thick as a seed catalogue lay on top of a stack of blank forms. Hannah flipped it to the middle, bills of lading, clipped in neat pairs. Route sheets with the same hand printing the same letters. Our BF14 circled again and again. Buyer names in small type at the bottom corner. Not pet stores, not rescue groups. Numbers that meant wholesale. States that weren't theirs. Interstate, Hannah said, low. Larger than a local hustle. The deputy slid the binder into an evidence bag and initialed the seal. That gives the DA room to breathe, she said. Maybe gives us company from the state. She checked the top drawer of a metal file and found a thin envelope of stamped tags. The kind you loop on a crate when a crate is pretending to be a box of bolts. No brand name. No feed mill logo. Just blank circles for someone to fill with a lie later. They thought they were tidy, John said. They forgot about heat and sound. He meant the thermal Eli fed to a phone and the small recorder in John's glove box, the one Iris had saved from erasing. Not yet. That part could wait. The room itself was enough for now. It smelled like coffee gone bitter and the laundry of a man who sleeps in his truck. There was a picture tacked at eye level, a boat at sunset, the kind of thing you buy by the gas pump, corners curled. John took it in without touching it. Men dress up bad, work with pretty pictures, like weeds, dress up a broken fence with morning glory. Back at the bay, Hannah had the third row open. Bowls scraped. Tongues worked. One little brindle with a white boot on his back foot pressed his face to loose shoulder and then lay flat. Belly long, the posture of a creature trying to remember how to rest. Lou adjusted an inch to make room and let his breath stay slow. Dogs learn from dogs faster than from saints. Count and tag, the deputy said. We'll transfer to county crates. Photos at each step. If any look medical, they go in the first run. Iris waved from the scale house door, a stack of papers held under her arm. Manifests, she called. The copies I was allowed to see and the ones he didn't think I saw. She passed them to the officer with a look that said she knew how to keep her job and her soul at the same time. Courage comes in quiet sizes at docks. A gull landed on a piling and watched with one eye, then the other. Sun pushed through the fog until the water showed a skin. The second rig's driver started to cry in an embarrassed way. A grown man remembering the kid he used to be before he signed for night work. The deputy found him a bottle of water and a patch of curb. She had arrests to make and still found time to be human. That's what turns mornings like this into something a town can live with. Roe tried to drift toward the forklift again, habit tugging at his feet. Lou's head rose. That was enough. The man stopped, shoulders dropping the way a horse drops when he figures out nobody's going to yank his mouth today. He shuffled back to the post and stared at his boots like they had answers written on them. Hannah leaned into the last latch. It stuck, then gave with a sigh. Inside, a small old dog with a salt face stood and braced his legs as if the floor might tip. Hannah slipped 2 fingers under his collarbone, never at the neck, and murmured to him the way she would to a mare with a bad memory. He walked out like someone stepping into a church after years away. Mina shifted her tone a hair warmer, held the book steady, and let the words trim the edge off the world. Easy now, easy now. We're all right. Load them, the deputy said. And the team moved like folks who know how to lift without making their backs cruel. County crates lined up like pews. Dogs found corners and blankets and one another. The air changed from bleach and sweat to a busy, decent smell a body could stand. Evidence bags filled and sealed. Cereal plates photographed. A hydraulic hose tagged. The binder rode away under a badge. Paper can be a rope too, if you use it right. Pike watched the crates go, his face smoothing into a kind of nothing. You could see the math in him, what he thought of men and dogs and money and loss. John didn't give him his eyes. He saved them for Mina, who was still reading, and for Lou, who was still making himself into a door that opened out instead of in, sir. The deputy said to John, finally, as the last crate lift clicked shut, "You can bring your dog." It sounded like permission and thanks at once. John tapped the bucket rim once before he picked it up. The sound was small in the now loud morning. Lou's ear turned to it anyway, the same as it had the first time in the market, that first small hinge swinging. He stood, shook dock dust from his chest, and worked his jaw like he was getting the taste of the bay out of it. Then he fell in at John's knee and looked up at Mina, waiting for her to give the day its last word. She closed the book and held it to her chest. "We did it steady," she said, "to nobody and to everyone. We did it quiet." "Quiet is how barns stand," John said, setting the bucket on the truck floorboard so the handle faced forward, the open circle waiting. He looked back once, at the bay, at the false wall, now just a wall, at the tape crochetted bright against dull plywood, at the men learning the weight of plastic on wrists, at the little old dog curled in a crate like a comma finally in the right sentence. He let himself feel satisfied, not loud about it. Just the clean sort that rides home with a man and lets him sleep. As they pulled away, Iris lifted 2 fingers from the scale house, a doc's version of a blessing. Eli biked beside them for 20 yards, one hand on the bar, one hand up in a small salute, then peeled off to Ward County 6 to send files and charge batteries and tell his mother he'd be late to breakfast. Hannah rode with the deputy, eyes already on the next paper she'd have to write and the next dog she'd have to hold. Fog thinned to nothing. The bell on the buoy kept time until the truck turned inland and the sound fell behind. Lou settled with his chin on the bucket handle again, breath long, eyes soft. The road home lay simple as twine, and the fields would be waiting the way fields always do. They had opened the hidden bay and found what was kept there. They had pulled a thread that might lead farther than this county. maybe farther than this state. But for now, they had 15, maybe 20 little lives who would sleep on clean towels before noon. And a bulldog who had once refused everyone had answered to taps and a voice, and turned refusal into a job done right. Paperwork took the rest of the morning, the kind that piles up like hay after a good cutting. The county crates rode off in 2 loads. The deputy's crew chalked marks on the dock and measured everything a second time, because courts like rulers more than stories. By the time the wharf went quiet, the gulls had given up their commentary, and the fog was no more than a smear on the far water. John waited until the last crate door clicked, then reached into the glove box and brought out Iris's little recorder. He set it on the tailgate where the deputy could see, the way you set a coin down to prove it's real. "We think this is how they moved the dogs without noise," he said. He pressed play dot to taps, quick and hollow. A single tongue click, a pause, the pattern again. Somewhere under it, the ripple of tight breathing, then that sound flattening into calm as the rhythm took hold. After the 3rd round, a man's voice flat, practical said, "All right now," like he was stacking feed, not fear. The deputy didn't blink. She just nodded once, as if a piece of fence she'd been testing was finally snug. "That's enough to make a jury lean forward," she said, "and enough to make a judge give me more paper." Hannah stood with her, hands in her pockets, eyes on the floorboards like she could see the math of it through the wood. "Whoever made that recording didn't invent the cadence," she said. "That's a field code. It belongs to work. They stole it." Iris came from the scale house with a folder tucked under her arm and a look like a person carrying their own truth to the altar. "Name you'll want is Harlan Britt," she said. "Old hand from the county stockyard, used to run the midweek pens, good at quieting a crowd. Retired last year when the yard cut hours." She touched the recorder with a finger and pulled back like it might burn. Pike paid him to come by and consult. He said he was just showing how to keep things calm. He said he didn't know what for. "Maybe he didn't," John said, though the words were gravel in his mouth. "Maybe he did." The deputy wrote the name on her pad. "We'll find out," she said. "I'll ask a question he can't answer sideways." Pike, wrists cinched and patience thin, laughed without sound. He rolled his shoulder against the post like a bull trying a new gait. "You think taking my notes and my little tape makes you clean," he said. "Boys will still load for whoever pays. Tide doesn't stop for your feelings." John didn't look at him. Talking to Pike felt like dropping seed on a paved lot. Instead, he let the recorder run once more and watched Lou listen. The bulldog's ear turned, not to the words, to the beat. Tap, tap, click. He shifted closer to Mina, laid his chin on her shoe, and went still. That was the code's true measure. Not what it could make men do, but what it let a scared body stop doing. "Turn it off," Hannah said. "Let's not teach the air any more of that than we have to." They signed where the deputy pointed witness here. Chain of custody, their and drove inland to the station to give statements. Iris peeled off for her shift, promising to come by the farm at dusk with a thermos and whatever courage looked like after a day like this. Eli pedaled home to eat what his mother put in front of him and charge batteries. Then send copies of files to the cloud where paper fire can't reach Dot at the station. A man in a ranch coat and a tie read the warrant again and grunted in the right places. He wanted times exact and distances measured. John gave him fence post directions, half-mile past the willow break, 2 lengths short of the old grain spur. Hannah supplied code sections like a feed recipe, exact. Mina sat in the corner, with Lou's head on her knee, and kept talking in a whisper to battle the hush. A government room hangs on a child. By mid-afternoon, fatigue watched from the doorway like a neighbor with casseroles, unavoidable, not unkind. They went home by the long road because it passed a strawberry tunnel and the little pond, where geese scolded anything that tried to be brave. The farm rose up in its ordinary clothes. Sun on the milk parlor door, hose leaking at the faucet, a cloud of dust where a truck turned on the county line. Normal was the mercy they needed. They ate late, standing in the kitchen. Stew reheated into something better than it had been the first time. Mina leaned on the counter and drew quick studies of crates turning into beds. Eli sent her a photo of one of the little dogs asleep on a towel at the clinic, a toy tucked under its chin like a promise. She put the phone face up and traced the outline with her finger until the image felt like it lived on paper. Just before the light went gold, a deep truck downshifted at the end of the lane. John's back stiffened before his brain named it. He wiped his hands and stepped to the porch, one pace ahead of Lou, because habit and humility live in the same boot. A red county pickup stopped by the mailbox. The deputy climbed out and met them halfway with the look a horse has when it knows how far it has to go before water. "We picked up Harlan," she said, not making a meal of it. "He says Pike paid him $100 an hour to train calm. Says he never asked what for. Says work is work." She let that sit. "He recognized your tap on the recorder. Says it's stockyard common. Says he taught half this valley the bucket code." Her face softened a hair. "He also said there was one time he showed it to a kid at the auction because the calf wouldn't settle and the kid had the right touch. Said the kid's voice was the kind that makes animals not argue." She looked at Mina. "Bet he'd remember you." Mina went still, proud and stricken at once. The way a person looks when a compliment has a thorn glued to it. "It's just a beat," she said. "It's not a spell." "Beats can be spells when men decide money has the right to borrow them," John said. He hooked a thumb in his belt to keep from making a fist the world didn't need. "You did nothing wrong, kiddo. This is on men who know better." The deputy nodded. "I'll take his statement to the DA. He'll likely plead to something, and we'll use him to pull a longer rope. We're looking at the buyer list. Some of those names smell like interstate. We'll need state teeth for that. But we won't let it fray at this county line." She didn't stay. The kind of work she wore never lets a person sit long. When her taillights went down the lane, the yard felt large again, as if breath had come back to it. John turned to the chores that anchor a man when the map in his head is too big. Check the gate chain. Crack the hydrant so it won't freeze some winter far from now. Coil the hose without kinks because kinked hoses are a sin on any farm. Mina sat on the porch step and put the recorder on the board between her shoes. "I don't like that it listens like a dog," she said. "I don't like that a sound can be stolen." John lowered himself beside her, knees popping. Lou leaned against both of them, a small blessing with a big chest. "Sound doesn't have a side," John said. "Folks, give it one. We'll give it back. We'll use the same beat to undo what it did over there." He clicked his tongue once Habitin stopped himself, smiled at the foolishness of correcting a lifelong reflex. "Maybe we don't overuse it," he added. "Maybe we keep it for when you mean it." Mina nodded and reached down to rub the soft part in front of Lou's shoulder. "I mean it now," she said. They watched the field turn the color of a copper penny before dark and listened to the small sounds that make a place your own, the wind working the maple, the burr of a nighthawk, a cow thumping a gate because gates are for thumping. Lou breathed that slow bulldog breath that feels like you've been forgiven for something you can't name. Later, When the house was quiet and the last dish faced upside down on a towel, John set the recorder in a kitchen drawer, not to hide it, to keep it from making a habit of the air. He tapped the bucket rim once in the doorway, just enough to place a period on the day. Lou's ear flicked, and he lifted his chin in answer. Mina, half asleep on the couch with a dog-eared paperback over her face, murmured easy now, like a person dreaming of something without fear. John stood there a while and thought about men who sell language and men who buy it, and how each of them goes to bed telling himself a version of a story that lets him sleep. He thought about Harlan's $100 and what $100 looks like in a kitchen like this one. He thought about Pike's mouth when the fork settled. He thought about the dogs riding to clean towels and the deputy's pen chewing through paper and the way Eli had learned to hold a drone steady in wind. Then he thought about the only part he could own, the next fence line, the next steady tap. The next morning he owed to a little bulldog who had refused every hand until one voice said home. Summer thickened and took its time. The pasture went from green to the color of old glass, and the strawberry rows slowed to handfuls. Work found the same beats it always had: feed, fix, check, mend. But there was a new piece on the land now. A square of ground that used to be a tired shade house and a lean-to nobody bragged on. John and Eli stripped it to the ribs, pulled nails straight and saved the good boards, then framed a run along the south fence where the wind came easy. Hannah brought plastic tubs and bleach and the kind of practical lists that keep a place from collapsing the first week. Iris showed up with a clipboard and the look of a woman who'd given worry an exact job. They painted the gate a cheerful blue that didn't pretend to be fancy. Mina lettered a sign on an old cedar plank with a brush too big for the job and a grin that refused to be sensible. Field Haven, it read. The E leaned a little, generous and honest. They dug in shade sails and rolled pea gravel into level. John built a low bench along the fence out of 2 by 10s so a child could sit with a dog and not wobble. Lou supervised from every patch of shade he could find, moving from one to the next with the slow dignity of a foreman who knows he's already done the hardest part. Word got out the way it always does in a small county. A church lady brought towels folded the same way she folded casserole. The high school shop class sent to boys who pretended not to care and then cared like it was a grade. The deputy dropped in between calls, set a box of clipboards on the bench, and left before anyone could make a fuss. A retired man brought a bucket of screws and stayed the morning, tightening what needed tightening without telling stories unless asked. The first dogs from the dock came back by 1s and 2s after the clinic cleared them. They came in thin and cautious and left thicker with names. Mina set the reading rug under the maple and practiced the same slow cadence she'd used at the bay. Easy now, easy now. We're all right. She didn't read to fill the air. She read to set a beat, the way you set a pace for walking a tired hill. Dogs settled around her ankles as if the rug had a magnet stitched into it. Lou lay at the edge, square and solemn, a little wall with a soft middle. Hannah turned the lean-to into a tidy corner clinic, with a scale that didn't wobble and a shelf of salves with labels in a steady hand. Iris pinned a schedule to the post. Intake at 9, quiet hours after lunch, visiting from 3 to 4 on Saturdays. She printed simple rules anyone could follow. No chasing, no loud, no food in pockets, no promises you can't keep. On the bottom she wrote, in letters only she would think to use, listen to the dog. Some days were just small, good work. A young couple came for a fearful brindle and learned how to sit on the floor without needing eye contact. A widower stopped by just to look and left with a slow old beagle and the instruction to let the dog teach him naps. A teacher brought her class to read library books to whoever wandered close. Half the kids read to Lou because he looked like he'd heard everything and didn't judge a stutter. The big work mattered too. The DA called. The deputy grinned without smiling. Pike pled to enough counts to keep him quiet for a long stretch, and the buyer list turned into something with state teeth. Harlan came to the farm with a hat in his hand and a face he hadn't shaved. He stood on the porch like a man showing up to a funeral and said he'd done wrong by not asking. He left the $100 bills in an envelope, with no name and the promise to teach the beat for free to anyone who needed it for the right reasons. John shook his hand because some things you fix with hands even if you can't fix the past. One late afternoon, when heat ran thin and the wind smelled like apples, a county van pulled up and a tech carried in a small, white-muzzled terrier with ears that read like question marks. "We're calling her Hazel," the tech said, soft. "She's stubborn as grit and twice as gritty. She's had a day." Hazel wanted nothing to do with anyone. She braced her legs and set her jaw and gave the whole place a look like a woman inspecting motel sheets. Behind her, a line of folks who'd read about Field. Haven on the bulletin board at the hardware store shifted their feet and tried the kind of smiles dogs don't buy. Hazel turned away from each of them with the same precise refusal Lou had once used on a whole market. "Let her say no," Hannah said, not unkind. No is part of yes. The line thinned. Sun slid lower. Hazel explored the fence and then parked herself with her shoulder to a corner and her eyes on the gate, as if daring hope to try foolishness. Mina, who had given her voice to a small army all summer, sat on the rug with her book and didn't open it yet. She rubbed the little scar on Lou's neck with one thumb, the groove soft now, and watched the terrier out of the side of her eye. "Hazel," she said finally, speaking like she did to skittish calves. "I have a beat if you want one." John stood by the bench with the bucket in his hands. He looked at Mina and she looked back, and between them passed the sort of permission that people who have worked the same ground share without sentence. He tipped the bucket and gave the rim to taps a small, homely sound, all tin and memory, and then added the tiniest click of his tongue. Not a trick, not a command. A door, Lou's ear turned, reflex and home. He didn't move. He let the sound belong to the newcomer. Mina opened her book and counted soft. "Easy now, easy now. We're all right." Hazel's ears pricked and flattened and then pricked again. Her front foot shuffled an inch. She looked at the gate, then at the sound, then at the gate again. The second tap landed. The click followed like a nail set clean. Hazel set her jaw hard as a nut, and then, grudging as sunrise on a cloudy morning, she walked a line that wasn't straight. The path of a creature who had been taught to doubt, halfway across the pen. She paused and thought better of the whole experiment. She glanced backward, sharp as a tack, measuring escape routes. Mina didn't fill the air. She let the space stay big enough for a choice. John held the bucket low and quiet. Lou breathed like an old pump, long in, long out. Steady. Hazel took the last 3 steps at a trot. The kind of trot a little dog uses when she's not going to admit she's coming until it's too late to take it back. She reached Mina's knee, stopped with her toes on the edge of the rug, and put one paw, just the one, onto Mina's shoe. Then she looked up, and the look said something words don't handle well. "I will try." Mina didn't gush. She didn't grab. She turned one page and read the first line like a woman who believed in bridges. Easy now, easy now. We're all right. Hazel blinked at the cadence, felt its shape, and let her paw stay. A sound rose behind them, the small applause of neighbors who'd learned not to clap, loud around skittish things. The church lady dabbed at her eyes with the corner of a towel. Eli whooped under his breath like a boy at a fair. Iris, leaning on the post with a coffee she hadn't finished, smiled in a way that could hold the whole county. John's throat tightened in that quiet way older men don't talk about. He set the bucket on its side where it wouldn't roll and leaned both hands on the bench, shoulders easy. He looked at Lou, who looked back, and in the Bulldog's square, thoughtful face he saw the map of the last months, the market sign, the mill, the dock, the code, the breath that steadied a room. He saw the simple truth that had brought them through. A creature says no until the world speaks in a language he trusts, and then the hinge turns. Evening softened everything. The maple made lace of its leaves. The sign Mina had painted through a long, blue shadow. The air settled into that good farm quiet where sounds travel far and mean what they say. The deputy's tires whispered by on the road. Somewhere, a boy practiced free throws on a driveway that never saw a net. Thump and hiss, thump and hiss. Lou lowered his head until it touched the edge of the rug. Not crowding Hazel, just letting her know the floor belonged to both of them. Hazel shifted a breath closer, as if the Bulldog's gravity solved a math problem she'd been stuck on all morning. Mina kept reading. John let the last of the daylight climb his boots, and then his knees, and then his hands. He thought about how a life gets built out of small choices and steady beats. He thought about the gift of a language that doesn't insist, only invites. When the light finally went, the lamp over the lintel clicked on and threw a soft, useful circle. The new pen held sleep. The gate held. The sign held. Lou breathed like a metronome, and Hazel matched him without giving herself away. John gathered the bucket because that's what he does, and he tapped the rim once. Nothing more than a period at the end of a good sentence. The sound carried far enough to touch the road and come back. It was not magic. It was proof. The little Bulldog who had refused every hand had taught a farm and a town how to answer refusal with a rhythm that kept its promise. And here, under a maple in thin summer light, a new pup refused every adopter until one voice, familiar as tin and kind as breath, made room for yes. Asterisk, if this story warmed your heart, leave a quick note below. Tell us your first name and where you're watching from, or just type easy now to cheer on the next rescue. Do you have a rescue of your own? One line is enough. Your words help these stories travel. Subscribe and stay with us. We'll bring you more true, quiet victories, one calm voice at a time.